okay, we pay for school, and how do we stay in school, the studying aspect. So I'm wondering, how has your studying changed from undergrad to now?
I think the most important thing in the way Indigo just framed this question is that your studying tactics will change. What you do, what works for one course is not going to work for the next, and you really need to be flexible with your learning and be patient with yourself. I think for me, in undergrad, I did a lot of input, just really learning concepts, but not doing as many test questions as I probably should have. And then once you get to medical school and you're taking tests almost every week, I think it's important to really do a lot more test questions, invest in a question bank early, and that way you're staying on top of like board exams and your regular coursework that you'll have to complete.
I just want to clarify, Rob, are you saying that undergrad should be using test banks too?
Yeah, if I could go back in time, I would use a question bank in college. I think it's very helpful.
Yeah, I think kind of Rob also touches on kind of the concepts behind. So for example, in undergrad, I felt like I was doing a lot of, for example, methods that I used in high school. So maybe I would read a textbook and I would highlight, or I would write down notes from the textbook, or I would rewrite notes from the lecture. Whereas now when you're trying to learn, you're trying to use definitely better techniques. So one person I used to watch a lot on YouTube was Ali Abdal, and he's a physician based in the UK, or used to be, now he's a full-time YouTuber. But he started his channel basically about the best methods that are evidence-based, which is what we try to learn in medical school, evidence-based medicine. But he was talking about evidence-based ways to study. And so question banks are an example of how you can do spaced repetition. They're an example of how you can test yourself. They're an example of how you can fuse different concepts together in order to answer questions in different ways about that concept. So I think it was super important to transition to methods that had more evidence behind them. A lot of us use like flashcards, as well as specific flashcards that have spaced repetition within them. And then a lot of it is more focusing on how you're learning for life instead of just learning for a test. It's super tangible for us to be trying to learn these concepts because our patients' lives depend on them, and so there's more at stake than there was in university.
I think you bring up a really good point, Indiana. Just that within medical school, literally anything you learn from first year all the way through fourth year could one day come up with a patient. There might be some super rare genetic disorder that you know, when you're learning it, you're like, oh, why do I need to know this? 1 in 5 million people have this, and then maybe someone comes in with that constellation of symptoms, and you or one of your coworkers need to be able to recognize that. So it's really important that we are taking everything that we're learning seriously. And I think we talk a lot about that we end up changing our study habits, but I think it's important to really emphasize why. And I think it's because medical school versus undergrad or high school, there's just so much more material coming at you. Oftentimes you'll hear that it's like drinking water out of a fire hose. And what that's saying is that you're just getting overwhelmed by all of this information, and it's hard to take it all in. So really, most medical students don't spend time working part-time jobs. Instead, they are using all of their time to study. And that's just because we have to be able to learn all of that information.
I think one reality about being in medical school is like from the moment you get to medical school, you're inundated with so many resources, and so it really does require you doing some introspection and taking a step back and saying like, what works, right? Like if you're not, you'll hear this word Anki, like if you're not an Ankier or an king or queen, then don't do it, right? Because just because everyone else is doing it and it doesn't work for you, like there's no point in doing it. If like you don't work well with even, sorry, this might be taboo, but like coming to class, right? And like you work well studying by yourself, then do that. But you have to be honest with yourself, because if not, you'll spend a whole year doing things that are not productive and make you frustrated. And so, yes, you have like a plethora of resources, but like be mindful about how you use those things.
And I think with the plethora of resources, like, you know, to put it all together, you have to engage with the material deeply, whatever it is. And I think, if anything, that's been like something that's carried me through undergrad and med school. Whatever specific method I'm using, I'm interacting with it in a deep way. I remember at Xavier, I told myself, like, I need to know it to the point I can teach somebody else, or be able to, you know, go back and forth with a classmate while we're studying about the material, or like when you get to the point where you can make a joke about the material, you know it because you're using it right. So there's a term like deep work and working, you know, without distractions, or at least minimal distractions. Just working in a way where you're absorbing the material. And I think if you are like a class goer, when you're in a class, that is time and energy. So if you're in there, you need to be soaking that in, right? Like, there's no point in